Adrienne Johnston, freelance economy. Have you considered becoming a freelancer? So, Adrienne, bad experiences in corporate America, was, as she put it, wasn't compensated for what she felt had value for. She cites a specific example. She ends up working late and the boss went to the lake house. And so, she gave notice, branches off. Now, she's a presenter. She does presentations in PowerPoint. This is where she found her greatest joy. She's actually a chemistry major in college. So she branched out, became a freelancer, got some clients, kept at it, learned some great lessons. She actually now teaches others how to do it as well. There's some do's and don'ts, as you can imagine. The biggest risk, of course, is getting new clients. How you're going to maintain them. She's very much an introvert, and she'll tell you that. She speaks a lot, she says, but she is an introvert. So there's always that conception that you have to be an extrovert to sell. So she talks about that and how the pros and cons of still getting clients and not being an extrovert. She has a great Instagram where she has these stop believing posts. Stop believing that you need to take on any and every client that comes along. Excellent posts. We go over those as well. But just a great conversation with Adrienne and how she has taken on freelancing and how she's done so well with it, and now how she teaches others how to do it. It's a great conversation. I enjoy this. I use a lot of freelancers in my business. It's just a wonderful way to get projects done quickly and efficiently and directly. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic. I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm very, very, very excited to talk to you. Why is freelance a great option for many people?
Oh gosh. Well, for me, I found it to be incredibly valuable for a couple of reasons. First of all, I was always a high performer in corporate. Um, and so I worked really hard and I never really felt like my compensation was as aligned with the value that I was bringing. So I always laugh that the thing that I remember in my head where I had like this moment of epiphany was it was one Friday night and the owner of our company was heading out to go to his lake house and I was the one there working late on Friday night. And I was just like, there's something really wrong with this, right? There's nothing, if I'm the one over here doing the work, I can totally do this myself. Why don't I have a lake house? And that was, I think for me, the beauty of freelancing was I could finally align, I think, the value of my skill set with my income, but even the recognition. And then the other thing was just a cultural thing. I find bigger organizations have the more people you get, the more dysfunction you get. And if you're not really diligent about building the right type of culture, which is something that's really important to me, you can build a really dysfunctional place. And and all of my friends, everybody who's in corporate, you hear the stories and you're just like, it's everywhere. It just permeates, right? And so it was really important to me if I was going to build something to build it right. And if that meant maybe keeping it a little bit smaller and really just making sure it was 100% the right people and we were being really thoughtful about what we were building. So obviously it's just started out as me being freelance, and then I hired somebody last summer. So I have one team member now, but we're really thoughtful in the way we communicate, and the way that we do things. And I don't know that it'll ever get past that. So yeah, I think there's a huge value in, for me, a lifestyle and financial perspective.
Yeah, it's so interesting you said there about your what you were doing didn't align with your compensation. We just kind of see that happening. But then they'll say in those bigger companies they have a little bit more steadier income. There's a little bit more security, although there's been plenty of layoffs as of late. But that'll be their argument. And also, I worked in the corporate world a lot. There are those that just kind of like to slide a little bit, Adrian. There are those who kind of hide out and don't mind not doing stuff, which was very odd.
It's very frustrating to those of us who are doing stuff and you're the one picking up the slack because you have pride in your work and you want to get it done. And then, they're making as much, sometimes more than you even. Like, how is this possible? And yeah, that happens a lot. I would say, to the point about job stability, I feel now, and I totally get it, right? Because I was there in corporate where I thought, freelancing meant lack of job stability. It meant you really
Mm,
couldn't get a job. I didn't really understand it before I did it. But for me now, at any point in time, I'm probably 20 to 25 active clients, at varying levels. There's probably 10 that are, the 80% of my revenue, the bulk of revenue. But if
mm,
something happens, my main point of contact leaves and goes to another company, they'll usually take me with them to the new company.
mm, mm.
Sometimes you stay at the old company, but sometimes the new person there brings in their person with them. So sometimes then you lose that. Um, but what you're talking about then is losing, 8, 10% of revenue, not 100%.
Mm,
So there's some instability, but you always just you now have control over it in a way that you don't have control over when you're a full-time employee, right? So if I'm a designer on staff, I'm not responsible for bringing in the new clients. I'm not the account manager. I'm not
mm,
responsible for those relationships, the sales, the operations. I just do the design. But as a freelancer, I'm responsible for the sales, the marketing, the operations, the designing, all of it. And so I can make sure that I'm doing all the things that need to be done to make sure that I have stability, the stability that I
mm.
need. And so I'm never not marketing. I'm never not doing the things that I need to do to create that sense of stability in my business. But I'm also prepared, right? I can also control the financial cushion that I have
Right.
to make sure that if, things happen in the economy, things take a turn, that I'm prepared for that in a way that I don't know that a business is, because they're pulling money out of it to do whatever, they want to do.
It's a really good point. I remember when I started my business, I remember friends telling me, "Must be so nice, not to have a boss, not anyone telling you what to do." I have more bosses now than I've ever had. I mean, every one of my clients is my boss. Heck, my employees are my boss. My vendors are, I have to listen to everybody. Sure, I can tell you have an example where you fired a big client, I think you said this year, but we certainly can, remove them, but we have repercussions for that. So the idea of let's start a freelancing business, I'll just answer to myself and nobody else. It's not the case. You still have to work and you have to perform. Certainly you could do it at your own terms, but you have to still report to somebody. You still have to work for somebody and listen to them.
100%. And I think for me, that was just such a huge part. So I was about 9 months in to my freelance business. It was a Friday night, and I had a whole project I hadn't even started on. It was for one of my very early clients he was the king of revisions.
Hmm.
And he was one of my first clients. So he paid me like $200 and I worked for, 10 hours on a thing. It was ridiculous. But
Yeah.
I was so grateful, because he was like one of the first people that took a bet on me. And I remember sitting there on a Friday night, just like before, thinking, you still have work to do. You've rebuilt exactly what you're the lowest common denominator in all of this. If anything's going to change, it has to be you. because maybe we could drop you into any place in the world and you'll be working on Friday night at 5 o'clock by your own design. And so, yeah, you are your own boss, but you can create a mess of a business. You can create an amazing business. You have to be accountable to yourself and then all the people around you. And if you're not willing to establish boundaries, say what you're, and really be clear, I think, even and honest with yourself about what you want. How can you bring in the right clients? And that's something I'm really trying to work on. I am a people pleaser by nature. And so I just want to say yes to everybody. And what I've come to realize is even in firing clients, right? It's very rare that I fire a client and didn't have an instinct very early on that it wasn't the right fit. And that's not fair to them and it's not fair to me. It's wasted time for everybody, right? Even if we both get value out of it for some period of time, they could have still found someone else at that initial point in time and had a long-standing relationship with that person, right? You still create like a little bit of friction in their process by what? Trying to make somebody happy. And where I see that now in my business, I'm much better with cold leads, people who are coming to me that I've never met before. Where I'm seeing it now creep in is in referrals, where I feel this obligation to my existing client to take on this person that they've referred to me. They don't care. Right? They're just trying to help somebody else. And you're like, if it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit. So stop trying to force it. But it's funny, I mean, you're always learning and always, trying to figure out what are these like little nuances and how do you keep building the thing you want to build? How do you keep making it better? And I think that's a big thing that I have found in my business. I could have very easily built, a business that replaced my full-time income and where I worked just as many hours and all of that. Or with each passing year, right? I get better and more clear about what are the clients I want to keep? Who are the ones that are really my ideal clients? And how do you part ways or refer out those clients who maybe aren't the best fit? And you keep moving in the direction you want to move. And I think that kind of growth mindset and focus on that vision is so huge for really, especially as freelancers, continuing to move in the direction that you want to move and achieving the goals that you want. And probably all business owners, not just freelancers.
Well, that brings me to my next point. It's like, what's the difference now? You have an employee. What's the difference between a freelancer and just a small business? I mean, at a certain point, you have an employee,
Yeah.
you have other subcontractors that you deal with. I'm sure you refer things out. What is the difference?
I'm a small business now, I think.
You are.
I just still identify as a freelancer.
Mm.
But yeah, I think you're right. I am technically considered a small business because I have an employee now. It's not just me anymore. Um, and I guess there's probably like a technical accounting perspective too, right?
Yeah, right. A gap. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm an LLC with an
Mm.
S corp election. So even probably since then, I was technically considered a business instead
Right.
of a freelancer, just for tax purposes.
Yeah, yeah, it's in the eyes of the government. Because as a freelancer, you have to still claim. I don't want to get into tax weeds
Yeah.
here, go ahead.
We are
But
not tax professionals.
please
Our
let's
disclaimer.
say that. Let's say that. Yeah, but it's a fine line, I guess, because this whole resignation, and there's some debate of that whether it happened on whatever. People left after the pandemic; they weren't happy with their positions. They're freelance gig economy kind of happened. And I only see it as a positive. I mean, to this day, I probably have at least 25 subcontractors that are freelancers all over the world that I work with in wherever I need to work, just like yourself. So I think it's beneficial. What are why do I only see pros? What's the con?
Well, I think that there are, for some people, so my background, by the way, is marketing and operations. And so when I was in corporate, I was in small businesses. And so I was responsible for a really broad swath of the business, everything but
Mm,
really sales. Um, and so I had that capability. Like I understood insurance and payroll and
hmm,
all of these skills that I think maybe a lot of people don't get that experience. And so I think for some people as a freelancer, having to step out and go and acquire clients and then figure out how to do their books and do payroll and taxes, all of that's really scary and overwhelming. And a lot of
mm,
people maybe just don't do it. Um, and so I think it could be a struggle in that sense. And then I think too, if you're a freelancer who doesn't know how to structure your business, um, again, not a tax professional, but
Mm,
then you can end up paying more in taxes too. So then you have to charge more in order to offset that and all those expenses that you wouldn't normally pay for because your employer would pay for your
mm.
software subscriptions, your
Insurance,
hardware,
yeah.
your office space,
Mm.
those types of things.
Yeah, I've had great employees. I had a couple of bad ones, and you just kind of learn. But what you talked about before is that the culture. If you don't if you don't create a culture, unfortunately, it'll create itself, and that could be good or bad. So you have to be very, very careful of that. Um, with one employee, what do you do? Are they virtual, or are they near you? Do you get to see them?
We're virtual. So she's in Atlanta on the East Coast,
Ah,
and I'm in Seattle on the West Coast. So we have a time difference too, but we meet every morning, and then sometimes in the early afternoon as well. Um, yeah, and we just talk about what we're working on for the day. If we need to
mm,
collaborate on something, then we do that. If we're just answering questions, handing stuff off, then we do that there. But I will say, I think one thing that's really important has been really important to me, and we work through it every day, but is, I want a partner in many ways in the business.
mm,
And I think that's a tough thing, right? Because I'm also the boss. But I
right.
want somebody who's gonna, help me fill those gaps, right? Like the referral. We talked about the referral thing where I sometimes take on the wrong client. Somebody who's gonna say, hey, is this really the right thing for us to be doing? Let's take a pause. Because I do
Mm,
have gaps and blind spots, and somebody who's gonna be really comfortable. And that's the great thing about my teammate is she is really good and comfortable about, just bringing these things up. And I will say, she has a really optimistic spin on life in a way that I'll say, "Oh gosh, this
hmm.
wasn't a great thing." And she's like, "Actually, I think it's a great thing that that's happened." I'm like, it's a really great partnership in that sense. And so yeah, I think finding people that you can just really be open and honest with, and when you're stressed out or whatever, that you can just talk about it, is really huge. And I think so many environments, people don't feel like they can be open and honest. Um, and I think we both feel that way.
Mm. Yeah, that's a hard. I work with a lot of. I'm in the tech field, and a lot of the business owners have the mindset of treating employees like partners, and you have to kind of be careful there because they're
Yep.
not the business owners. They're not taking the risk,
Yep.
so they're not going to treat it like it's theirs. So unless they're actually our partners, so it's a very kind of fine line. And then I kind of see the opposite happening, not the opposite, where another degree is where where they're best friends. They come over on the weekends, they're friends, and you have to be careful of
Yeah.
friendship employees too, because there's some favoritism that may occur. It's boy, all this is sounding discouraging. It's not. It's great,
No,
but
it
it
is.
takes a lot of work.
It does. And I think as long as you're really being thoughtful about it and understanding what all of those potential pitfalls are and just being honest with yourself. And I think
Mm,
so many times, businesses just and people, right? Oh, my best friend works with me, but I'm not, there's no favoritism here. Of course there is. My brother in law works here. There's no favoritism. Of course there
right.
is. As long as you're being honest with yourself and understanding those implications and how they affect other people, and being open to those discussions, I think that's the big thing. And I think it's in so many cultures that I've seen, and then friends, where I hear things happening in their workplaces too. It's those discussions aren't welcome. They're very much shut down. And so then people feel like they're not heard.
Another thing you mentioned is that your your employees in Atlanta, some 3,000 miles from you, right? And the technology has made it so much easier to communicate and to collaborate. I mean, I've been using, well, I guess I'll just say we're using Microsoft Teams, and I didn't know I could have 4 or 5 people like immediately just kind of call them and have them all in the same. Anyway, I'm finding new features out all the time because my people are remote as well. And um, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it would be more difficult to be, to be one of these freelancers because the technology wasn't there. Also, things like Upwork. I know you mentioned that before. And these kind of platforms, again, technology really helping in us getting together and finding each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a completely different world than it was. I mean, even Zoom. So when I started freelancing in 2018, Zoom was what people were using to replace conference calls, and they weren't
Mm,
turning on cameras.
isn't that something?
And that it was just so phenomenal how much things have shifted. Um, so yeah, I mean, the timing, the technology, and I even think, the pandemic, obviously not a great thing to have happened, but certainly has shifted the technology and
Mm,
allowed for
mm.
a lot more people to work virtually, and certainly a lot more freelancers. And I think a lot of companies too, right? Like the ability to say, hey, we don't need somebody full time. We'd rather pay a little bit more and kind of have them on demand.
This term fractional
Yeah.
has really made a huge rise, right? I want a fractional chief marketing officer. I want a fractional designer. I want to, because they just don't need them all the time. And, back then it was, we need somebody. Oh, we need that. Okay, hire that person, and hopefully we'll have enough work for them. And you talk a lot, Adrienne, also about being an introvert and trying to do sales. Now,
Yeah.
you're more of an ambivert, I would say, right? You're extrovert when needed.
No. So I'm not, but I'm an outgoing introvert. So
Ah,
I talk a lot, and I'm a warm person.
yes.
But I would hole up in my house and I don't need to see people.
Mm.
All my friends are extroverts because they will come to me and they're like, we're doing this. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, I don't need that interaction. And so I also think, in hindsight, how much of my lack of interest and kind of mm, no, I take it back. I was listening to you and Sean Lardo talking about networking events at ConnectWise and things, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this sounds like pure torture to me, going
Ah,
out to a sports bar and talking to random people. So I'm totally an introvert. But for me, as a freelancer, what I had to figure out was, and I was thinking about, like, in the context of discipline,
mm,
how do you I was never going to discipline my way into doing that stuff. But how can you apply discipline and make it work for you in a way that's going to be beneficial? And so for me, it was, how do I attract clients to me? Because I'm a helper, I'm a people pleaser. So I said, okay, if I can find a way for clients to find me, then I can serve them. And so instead, where I applied that energy and discipline was to SEO, which was something that was
mm.
behind the computer. It was very comfortable for me, but it was work, right? You have to go figure out all of that. I had to go, understand it. And it's not as complicated as it turns out as I thought it was. But a lot of the SEO trainings and all these things are for people who are trying to build websites with advertising revenue and they need millions of page views a month. And I don't need that for my little freelance business. I need a couple of hundred. So I had to go through that. And then you have a huge part of that is getting backlinks. And so you have to be really diligent about, like, how are you going to go about doing that?
Mm,
So yeah, I think that that's an important aspect of, like, how much force do you apply,
mm.
right? And what are the right things to be applying force to in order to get there? I'd love your thoughts on that, by the way.
It was at a ConnectWise event actually, where pretty sure it was Daniel Pink, the great author, business
Yeah.
author. When he was talking specifically about this, and they did a study on who performs better in sales, introverts and extroverts. So your quick answer would be extroverts got to get out there and push and go, but introverts do a great amount of listening. For some long, engagement sales, it's better to kind of listen, take it all in, and then, make your point. So his point was this term ambivert, which was somewhere in between. You listen when you're supposed to, you talk when you can, really does the best. So, I am an extrovert, but there are points, where I just, I do sit back a little bit. And somebody told me once that the true difference between an introvert and extrovert is after a party, the introvert is exhausted, the extrovert is ready to go for more. You're the former, I suppose.
Oh yes, 100%.
Yeah, yeah.
As
It's
if you were able to
fascinating.
get me out to the party to begin with.
It's actually get there. Yes, yes,
I was
yeah.
too tired to go.
Now, another thing we should say, you're a mother of 3 girls. You know, you got a
I
husband, you
just
got a
have one,
great.
yeah.
Oh, you just have 1. I'm sorry. I
Just
thought you
one.
did. And you know, you know, you've got a great home life there. You shifted, you know, from you were a chemistry major? Do I have to?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, a big shift into this kind of freelance move, which brings me, you know, what mistakes do people make when presenting in PowerPoint?
Oh gosh. Um, so let's talk first just about presenting. I think the
Mm.
biggest mistake that most people make is lack of preparation, right? We know that most people fear public speaking more than they fear dying. And that is
Mm.
because, in my humble opinion, that is because you will speak in public more than you will more frequently than you will die. And so it's a very real fear that you're gonna like have to come across. But the anxiety of having to go do the thing makes people procrastinate and put it off. So if you can find the discipline to actually practice, rehearse, and prepare,
Mm.
you can get
Mm.
more comfortable. But what most people end up doing is they procrastinate, they get up there, and then they read off their slides. And it's
Mm.
one of the biggest mistakes that you can make, right? That's when we think of the death by PowerPoint stigma. That's what we think of. I'm going to see your ugly bullets and I'm going to watch you painfully read off of them very nervously, right? And it's uncomfortable for everybody. And so
Yes.
it's just a kind of a painful train wreck for everybody to watch. So I think, I mean, first and foremost, it's that. I think that if you can and practice, and then obviously what I do is I design the slides, right? And so part of what we're doing is saying, you don't want to have your talk track on the slides. And that really is how PowerPoint was meant to be kind of like a virtual note card.
Mm.
And so people just throw all of their talking points onto the slide as opposed to PowerPoint has speaker notes where you can have those notes there so that they're available to you, but they don't need to be on the slide where people are reading because that
Mm.
we know that that pulls their attention. They're trying to read and listen and they can't do both at the same time. And so if you can have your verbal or visual cues up on the slide and then tell that story when you're giving a presentation, right? How do you make it interesting for people? And then if you can visualize any data or statistics, things that are powerful, people will better remember the visualizations than you just saying it.
Mm.
So those are the big takeaways when it comes to presentations. I mean, everybody will tell you, it's too much text on a slide, and
Right.
everybody does it.
Mm.
I mean, Steve Jobs slides were like the ideal, right? I mean, most people can't get there. And I think every presentation designer in the world will tell you, yeah, that's the ideal, but most clients can't get there because they've got too much context. Um, if we were all selling iPhones, that would be great, but we're usually selling things that are more complicated than the iPhone.
Mm.
So, but yeah, it's still like people will have like full books on a slide, and you're like, oh no, it's too much.
You know, one point about the died in public speaking, somebody told me that originally, you know, thousands of years ago, small villages, small tribes, like people would get in front of the tribe and announce something that could be wrong, and when they were wrong, they got stones thrown at them. So it kind of started from there. I don't know how true that is, but as far as PowerPoint is, I think sometimes because when I do a PowerPoint, I talk and I have a few words on there and I do all the talking and you know I wave my hands and you know I that's only kind of helping me. But sometimes some of these financial decks aren't made to have a speaker. They're just made to kind of sent over to somebody so they can evaluate. So those are two very different
Yep,
ways.
100%. And so, yeah, you want those to have text and they need to have narrative text, right? They need to be able
Right.
to stand on their
Narrative.
own as if somebody was speaking for them. That's very different than kind of a keynote Steve Jobs style presentation.
Right, versus just pictures and a couple of words
Yeah.
and, because it's how you make them feel. When you see those TED Talks, seldom do they have images, right? Sometimes they'll have a graph, sometimes they'll have something there, but most it's just, you know, people, like you said, will remember how you made them feel, not necessarily what they said.
Absolutely. Yeah, and those
It,
speakers, I mean, it's so easy to think, "Oh, they just go up there and say whatever." The number of times they've probably practiced, they've
oh,
spent hours and
polished.
hours, tens of
Oh yeah,
hours
days. Yeah, 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 yeah,
practicing and practicing,
yeah.
getting feedback and nailing that. And the best public speaking I've ever done has been with hours and hours of practicing in advance.
Yeah.
And it comes off and it feels like you're talking to the audience and you're engaging because it's boring. It's rote to you at that point.
Right.
Like the
Right.
back of your hand, you can drop it and pick it up. Um, but I think a lot of people think that, oh, I'm just going to go up there and I'll just wing it. You can't.
No, no, no,
And
no. Yeah.
nobody's winging it.
Right. They'll sense it. Yeah. My youngest is in university and she's very much an introvert, not like me, more like her mother. And she's scientist and she every once in a while has to present. And she's like, I'm so nervous. I said, just be prepared. Just
Yeah.
be prepared. Go over it many, many times and it'll go. It'll be just fine. It'll be that's the real key. Now, Adrian, what's not only do you make this huge shift, right, from corporate to freelance, you do well. You talk about how you're making a few thousands to many thousands a month, and you're taking in these clients, taking in employees. But now you've decided to actually help others make the transition as well, which I feel is remarkable. It's a trait of a remarkable person. Why just keep this to myself and do it? But you actually teach others how to do it.
Yeah. You kind of think about like what is that purposeful kind of activity. It's funny because that side of my business takes up so much more time and is so much less profitable.
Mm,
I get so much joy out of it. And I don't know what that is.
interesting.
I think for a really long time, I felt stuck in corporate. Like I knew I should be doing something else.
Mm,
And again, there was, some of the cultural things that I wanted to be different. There was not feeling, kind of financially like the value I was bringing was as aligned with what I was making, and all of that. And I'm so sorry. I totally lost my train of thought.
You're talking about how you're being
Went out the
wasted in
window.
corporate and how
Yeah.
you're helping others become freelancers.
Yes. And so I think it was that, that real challenge that I had there that kind of forced me to say, okay, forced is not maybe not the right word. Maybe it was just this
Motivated.
real desire. Yeah. This
Mm,
motivation to say like, gosh, I know what that pain was. And I wish that
mm,
there had been somebody there to help me. And then, for such a long time, I was so afraid to do it. Like I
mm.
wanted to do it. And I was so afraid of, I'm not a salesperson, right? I'm an introvert who's not a salesperson. And I'll still say stuff like that. And I didn't know how I was going to do it. And I quit my job, honestly, and just was like, I'm going to figure it out.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that I know that I have figured it out and this ability to not help people. If I feel like it's something that I should do is to help other people figure it out.
Hmm. Stop believing that you need to take on every client that comes along.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I do not believe. For so many reasons. I think first and foremost, I think that not every client is the right fit for every person. I think there are personality differences. I think that there's style differences, especially for designers, right? There's actual like stylistic choices. Like, what are the
Mm,
projects you're going to enjoy working on? Um, and again, as a designer, I could build a business that was something that was very akin to the business that I left as a full time employee. Why would I do that? If I was unhappy there, why would I rebuild it myself? And so I think you should be really disciplined about who are the people that I want to work with. Um, but beyond that, if I'm doing my best work, I can now charge a premium,
mm,
right? If I'm not taking on any and every client, and one thing a lot of graphic designers do is say, okay, if I'm doing all the different types of graphic design work, book covers, restaurant menus, signage, print, websites, Shopify sites, if I do it all, then I have more opportunities for more clients.
mm.
But by doing that, one, you're not really attracting any clients, right? Because people don't go looking for a graphic designer, they go looking for somebody to design their Shopify site or a presentation designer. So you're not really attracting anyone. You're not really an expert at any one thing, so you're not efficient at the delivery, you're not fast. You can't charge a premium for it. So you're not making good money in the time that it does take you. And so you end up not, really scaling a business.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's kind of this cycle I always think that just doesn't really get you where you want to be. And so I think that people, if they really stopped and said, and I think this is probably every business, if you just really stopped and said, okay, like let's really focus on like who do we want to serve? Who are our ideal clients? I mean, even imagine the impact of culture.
Hmm.
This was always one of my big things is we always just had to work with whatever clients other people took on, whether they were good or bad. They were less inclined to care because they
Hmm.
were going to get their commission and they weren't the one having to deliver services to these awful people.
Hmm.
So the cultural impacts, the financial impacts to not just feeling like we have to trade, our souls for a dollar today, um, and really build a thoughtful business. And you just slow down a little bit. I'm not going to say that it doesn't slow you down. It does. But I think it slows you down to speed you up.
We get so blinded, big. You've got some very big names, and uh, Samsung and Facebook. I remember, but you were saying that about 80% still from the small to medium, and sometimes when you get to, you get some of these big clients, but they're going to be difficult, but you don't want to turn down the money. It takes some maturity and some seasoning and some discipline to really decide who you want to work with. Is all their aggravation worth it? Getting the employees upset, getting others upset. You have to look. What was the old saying I remember hearing once? We're releasing you to our friendly competitors or something like that.
I love that.
Yeah, something to that. Yeah. Your Instagram's great. You have these stop believing. I just mentioned one. Stop believing you need to be an extrovert or a salesperson to be successful as a freelance designer.
Yes.
We kind of talked
I
about this.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, I think that you don't necessarily need to do that. Just again, find ways to make who you are work instead of like putting all that friction in between you and what you want. Find ways to make things work for you. And I think there's so much conventional advice, especially for extroverts, right? Go out and cold call or go out and network. And I knew I would never do those things. And so I had to think about it differently. Um, And so I always recommend to people, like, if that isn't resonating, try and find something that is going to resonate with you. Don't feel hamstrung to conventional advice if you're not a conventional
Mm,
person.
and who is? Gosh darn it.
Right.
Uh, the sales it's such a slippery, you know, I we all have to do sales, right? Even to this, us talking is there's always sales involved in some degree. So you don't want to do sales. I want to create an environment in which it's easy to purchase, and there's so many ways to do that. Packaging is a huge thing. Just simplifying packages. I talk to some of these, tech companies who have 20, who have 20 options. Why not just have five? Talk to me about packaging.
Um, so I so I just do presentation design, right? So I have a very simple niche and I don't even do packages. I just do per slide. So I make it
I see.
really simple. I do per
Ah,
slide and then I have a project minimum, just to keep things simple. And then that way my
very
clients
good.
always know based on the amount of work that we're going to have, here's how much it's going to cost. So we're not doing
Mm,
quotes back and forth all the time. And then it's very rare that something is far outside of the realm. Like there are slides, right, that will have like a process diagram with 100 different parts and animations. Then we have to talk about this is a little bit outside of the realm of normal. But in general, you'll have a cover slide and some detailed slides, and they'll all average out.
yeah,
Yeah.
that is the way to do it, just to keep it so simple.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially as a
stop.
freelancer, right? A small
Right.
business, you cannot overcomplicate your life.
You got to minimize the barriers to entry.
Yep.
Oftentimes when you're dealing with corporations, I'm talking to the salesperson who loves it. Okay, then marketing's got to come in because it comes from their budget, and then they've got to come in and figure it out. And okay, this package with this option, it's just try to simplify it so it's easy to do business with them. Stop believing freelancing is unpredictable and inconsistent.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier too. I think that a
Yeah,
lot of people, and I did early on, I believed that freelancing meant you couldn't get a job.
right.
That's what people said.
Mm,
And I think, for some people, especially when you're just starting out, it is a little bit inconsistent, and it can feel that way. But if you're willing to find a way, again, if you're an extrovert and you're willing to get out there and network and meet the people, get the referrals, do the work. And really, I think niching is such a huge part of that. How do you become the expert at what you do such that you're getting the word of mouth referrals, but that you can really brand yourself too, and people can find you when they're looking for you? They
mm,
go in, and SEO is, not just Google search, but it's on LinkedIn and Instagram and all the other places
mm.
where people go and do searches.
Yeah,
They
YouTube.
can find you, and you can be that expert within your network for
Mm,
that thing that you do. Um, is so fundamentally huge. And so that allows you to really get there. Sorry.
got to work. You got to dig. I mean, in the beginning, I was working a lot, and I wasn't working very smart, but I was working hard, and it's tough. It's tough, but it's not for everyone. But freelance just it simplifies it a little bit in that it's just you now. You don't have to worry about so many kind of external things. Stop believing the term "pick a niche" means that you have to immediately stop everything and just provide one service. Very different from packaging, what we were talking about.
Yes. Oh my gosh, but this is one of the big things that a lot of people misconstrue when you say, "Oh, you should pick a niche," is they think I have to stop doing everything else that I'm doing and just start doing one thing right now. And it's really a very phased approach, right? If you just stop doing everything you're doing right now, and this is why people are resistant to just, picking a niche is, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make any money, right? I can't afford to not make any money. Of course not. Of course you can't. And so what you really need to do is instead say, hey, I'm going to rebrand around this thing, but I'm not giving up my core clients that I already have. If somebody asks me for these other services, of course I'll deliver on them. You can even do things like on your website. You can do all your rebranding on your LinkedIn and everything. And you can around this main offering, but then you can have other services or things like that that still kind of say, hey, I offer these other broader things as well. So it
Mm,
allows you to kind of make a phased approach into a transition. Because yeah, you definitely don't want to, stop all of your revenue. I did do that. I don't regret
right.
doing that. I did it very intentionally. When I was making
Hmm.
the switch, because I said, if I'm not working on this thing, then I want to be working on my SEO. I want to be working on my blog posts. I want to be really establishing myself as an expert at what I do. And so I chose to do that, but I also had the financial cushion of my husband's job to take a dip in revenue for a couple of
Ah.
months. So I was very fortunate to be able to do that. Um, but I don't think it's a necessity. And I think that you can definitely do it over time.
Yeah, I think when people say pick a niche, generally I think, okay, so you're in lawn care. Don't also, make pizzas and don't also, do oil changes. The so I think yeah, people kind of over kind of exaggerate what that means, I think.
Yeah, sometimes it can overcomplicate it for sure. And they
Mm.
think, oh, I need to be a presentation designer who only serves pizza parlors. Like,
Mm.
I don't know if there's a market for that.
Right.
You may have over niched.
Gee, Adrian,
Not
now
sure
I
you're going to
want
have enough
pizza.
business.
Yeah, exactly right. Stop believing PowerPoint is awful.
Yeah, so most designers hate PowerPoint with a passion. And I'll tell you, I
Mm,
mean, it's not the Adobe suite, right? And that's what most designers are classically trained on. But, I think even beyond designers, right, there is that stigma with PowerPoint, the death by PowerPoint stigma. And, we go into these presentations and we see the ugly bulleted slides and we know somebody's about to read off of them in this horrific fashion
mm,
to us. It's painful for all of us. But PowerPoint's actually a really cool tool if you use it appropriately. Even some of their new features, a lot of people just don't know how to use it, honestly.
Yeah,
But they're even coming out with some new AI tools that are being rolled out this
of
fall,
course.
um, that are really cool, that are going to help people like better design their own slides and kind of get out of those bulleted layouts and things.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, it's not a terrible tool. It's not always used effectively. What is that
mm.
expression? It's the end user. It's a user error.
User, yeah, yeah. I remember I used to like to mind map in it. I ended up getting another tool for it, but I mean, it's just so flexible just to kind of jot, whiteboard ideas down.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm in it a lot when I'm talking to prospects and talking to clients. It's just make the slides simple and and get your point across.
Yep. I even record videos in it. I record all
I've
of my
seen
videos
that.
in it. So
Yeah.
um, you can do all the recordings by slides. So we need to go back and edit just one part of the video. You can just go back and just edit that one part and then export the whole thing again. So it's
Mm.
really modular, which is nice.
It
It's a
is a
really functional
power
tool.
it is a powerful tool. Boy, I didn't, how do you like that? But isn't it Amazon says no PowerPoint anywhere? There's some companies that like refuse to use it. Do I have that right?
Oh, that does sound right. That's probably true.
Because I think what they're saying is because people are just putting paragraphs on each slide and, not getting their point across. I read his book and the two takeaways, Jeff Bezos' book, and the two takeaways was one, they never have a team big enough that two pizzas can't serve. Did I say that right? So team's got to be small.
Yeah.
Um, that I thought that was really good, and that company, huge. You know, everything's Amazon these days. It's absolutely incredible, and to think that nobody uses PowerPoint in that company is, I don't know. I could be wrong. That has to be. It has to be. Um, so when I started my company, much like yourself, I was working a lot. I was right out of college. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have a wife. I didn't have kids. I did very little risk and working way too much and 14-hour days. And I ended up gaining a lot of weight. And, Adrian, the doctor said to me, I got up to 340 pounds and size 46-inch waist. I was thinking about that today. I was looking at him. Anyway, I'm 32-inch now, by the way. So, the doctor said to me, if you don't lose the weight, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. My oldest was just born. So I spent the next year and a half losing about, I'm sorry, the next 7 months or so, losing about 130 pounds. And you talked about it before. You mentioned it before. People always ask me how, and I always say discipline. And I just wonder, you have brought it up before. How does discipline play a role in your life, Adrian?
Yeah, I think I've lost a lot of weight too. I've lost 60 pounds. I've
Congratulations.
always struggled with my weight my entire
Mm,
life.
mm.
And I've always fought the discipline fight. I always say I'd probably weigh 800 pounds. This is with so much discipline, and it's still, I have probably another
Mm.
60 to go. As it turns out, I was diagnosed with a metabolic disorder. There's a chemical in my brain that's out of balance. So my body fat gives a signal to my brain that says, hey, you've got enough body fat. My brain can't receive it. So my brain always thinks I'm hungry, which is actually like, so now there's a little medicine they give me, and that helps convert the signal in my brain. Super cool.
Wow.
Things that just 20 years ago, right, they would not have known.
Right.
Um, so anyway, I see a specialist for that. And so I've been over the last 2.5 years. And so it's nothing crazy, but oh gosh, the way I feel, I've never felt like this before in my life. Like
Mm.
I want to go exercise. I have energy. I've never eaten and felt better in my whole
Hmm.
life.
Hmm.
It's the most remarkable thing. I've heard other people say things like, oh, I just need to eat and then I feel more energetic. And I'm like, oh, I always felt worse after I ate. I never understood
Mm.
that.
Hmm.
um, so yeah, it's really fascinating. But discipline has been really interesting in that, because even on days where I'm like, oh, we're in Seattle, so 9 months out of the year it's rainy and you're like and cold, and you're like, I don't really want to go for a walk today, but I'm gonna do it.
Mm.
Um, so there's things like that. But I think a huge part in my business has been, how do I stay consistent? And I think for me, it may be the opposite of some people. I have to be really disciplined about shutting off
Huh.
work wise, especially working from home as a business owner.
Mm,
So,
mm.
where most employees are like, I don't get paid if I work more than 40 hours a week. I do get paid if I work more than 40 hours a week.
Right.
I do get paid if I don't take vacations. And so it's very easy to work weekends, especially when a client is like, hey, could you do this rush project for us? Not only that, you get a rush fee. Yes, of course. I'll work this weekend. So I have to be really good about setting those. And then I'm a people pleaser on top of it.
Mm.
So I have to be really good about saying, okay, like I'm not working every weekend, right? Like, and what are the limits on how often I'm going to do that in order to accommodate a client? Who are the right clients to accommodate on that kind of thing? When do I outsource it to somebody else to make sure the client gets what they need, but I'm not the one working on it? Um, and so that does take a lot of discipline. And I find someone said this to me the other day, and I just thought it was such a perfect description. She said, you're still in the pendulum phase of boundaries. And I do kind of swing, like
Mm.
I try, but that inclination to be a people pleaser and even to be focused on like, oh yeah, I could do this. I'll make a little bit more money this month. I'll hit that goal, right? Because it is goal driven. It's
Yeah.
discipline towards that thing, just not this wellness thing and well-being thing over here. Um, is is difficult for me at times. So I'm trying to figure out how do I get maybe I need to set like a number of hours a weekend or like 3 weekends out of the month you can't be working or something like that. How do you I'm a very quantified person. Like how do you quantify it and make it into something you can measure?
So it is the bad thing about working from home is that
Oh,
it's nice you don't have a commute, but it's bad because you don't have a commute. So if it's I got a couple hours on the weekend, I drift over to my laptop, start answering some emails. Next thing you know, 3 or 4 hours have gone by, and I could have met some friends somewhere, and I didn't. And I don't have I don't have a separate room with just my office. I don't know. Maybe that's a better, you can close that door and get away from it. I'm not sure. Somebody gave me the advice of uh put on light a candle. Whenever the candle's on, that means you're working. And when you blow it out, you walk away and you can't work anymore. So I tried that for a while, but then I just started ignoring. It's very tough, especially when you're the business owner, because like you said, if you work a little more, you make more.
yeah. And there are times that's convenient.
Right.
Especially people will say, all my clients always say this, enjoy your PTO. I'm like, there's no PTO around
There's
here.
no PTO. Yeah.
We're paying for a vacation and not making any money this week.
Right.
Ah,
Yeah. I started the business in 93, so it's now 30 years, and I'm virtually unemployable, Adrian. I mean, I can't imagine. Again, I work, I go to their offices, I'm diligent, with everything I do, but the idea of kind of, going from 9 to 5 every day, I end up going 10 to 7 most days or whatever it is, but still, I guess it's just how it's framed. Um, and so it's fascinating how discipline to you is your weight, is your work ethic. And when you try to talk to people about, I don't want to say converting, but you talk to them about, the benefits of going to freelancing, is discipline kind of needed a little bit with them? What's the big leap for them? What are they afraid of doing?
Um, I would say the big thing for most people is, how do I get clients? Am I going to be able to do that?
Right.
And because I talk so much about being an introvert, I tend to attract a lot of introverts.
Uh,
Um, so
hmm,
yeah, that tends to be ooh, do I have to go and talk to people? No,
risk.
you don't have to.
Right.
I found a way. You don't have to.
Everybody thinks about the guy who comes into the office and is selling whatever, or copiers or
Yeah,
whatever, or at the car dealership is like, I'll never be that person,
right.
and that just kind of, it gets daunting. Um, Yeah, it's just risk. It really is what it comes down to. I assume it's taking that leap, especially if, they have a mortgage and they have kids, etc. It gets more and more difficult.
Absolutely. But
What
it's
motive?
interesting too. It's always difficult for people who are single too, because on the flip side,
Yeah.
they're like, well, we don't have a second income to fall back
Mm.
on.
Yeah, when people ask me about starting a business, I said, "How long can you go without a salary? How long?" If they say just months, no, 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 no. You got to build a nest egg. Then
Yeah.
you've got to go. I don't know what the number is. At least a year, I would say, but because you never know. Before I started my business, I graduated a year before, and I got a couple jobs, and I just put all the money in. And again, it was easy to save back then. I lived with my parents. It was very,
Yeah.
very, very, very different. What motivates you, Adrienne Johnston?
Oh, so I am very financially motivated. So
Hmm.
I grew up very modestly in Southeast Georgia. And I mean, my grandparents always made sure we were financially secure, but my mom wasn't always very great with money.
Hmm.
And so I just remember that always being a very stressful thing as a kid, that we didn't have enough of it. And so value wise now, it's something that's really important to me is financial security. And I always laugh because I know a lot of people like envision like fancy cars or like nice handbags. And I'm like, we're not those people at all. We drive a Honda. Like
Hmm.
we're totally like very casual people, but I'm like, I want to know that I can retire. I want to know that like if we had a lot of family issues last year and we were getting on last minute flights and I needed to know that we could do that and that wasn't an issue
Hmm.
to be there for our family. So that's really important to me. And so I find that, even if I am like feeling unmotivated to work, I will literally go and put the work I need to do into QuickBooks and see the revenue and then be like, all right, I guess I'll get to work.
Wow.
But I guess, when you step back and you say, okay, what's that really for? It is about like retirement. It is about making sure my daughter can go to college. It is about us being able to vacation and, explore and see the world. Um, Again, I grew up in Southeast Georgia, so it was a small little upbringing. And so I love being able to show her how big the world is,
Hmm.
um, and giving her that exposure so young.
So then, how do you measure success?
Oh, obviously financially.
Same
But
answer.
also I think, that's a big part of it, obviously. But for me, it's been happiness too, right?
Hmm.
Because there was the financial component of me being unhappy before, but there was also I can be making great money. And we talked about the client that I fired last year. I mean, I didn't realize it until the end of the year. They were my highest paying client. I fired them halfway through the year. And by the end of the year, they were the highest grossing client.
Wow.
And at the end of the year, when I saw it, I didn't regret it. Part of the reason why they were always late to pay their invoices.
Hmm.
So you're like, what good was it for
Right.
them to owe me tons of money? No good. But they were also just like anytime I interacted with them, I felt stressed out and I felt, in many ways, they made me feel unconfident
Hmm.
and incompetent many times. They were one of those big organizations where they would give you the old, it runs downhill. And so you did it
Hmm.
wrong. And you're like, that's not what the brief was. So we can change direction now, but let's just all call it what it is.
Hmm.
But that's not what they would do. And so I thought I was just being super sensitive. So I referred it to a friend of mine who's just got way thicker skin than I do.
Hmm.
He fired him within 2 months. He was like,
Wow.
no, you were not being sensitive at all. He's like, I can't believe you tolerated them for so long. So yeah, long story short, I think that there's a component of like, again, I want to build what I want to build and I want to be happy every day. And I don't want to work with people where I feel drained or less than. I love working with clients where it's fun and it's easy and it feels collaborative
Hmm.
and they do their best work and they trust me to do my best work. Um, and certainly things change and things shift, but how do we approach it? Right. I think it's important.
Yeah, when you respect and you are respected and you respect them and just kind of camaraderie occurs. It's just magnificent. It's just the way it should be.
Yeah. And the way it can be.
Mm.
And that's so exciting, right? When you build something like that and you can actually see that it can be that way. And then I just feel every time I see somebody who doesn't have, you're like, oh, it could be that way though.
Mm, mm, mm.
Everybody could have their dream.
And that speaks to the culture of that specific organization, obviously. And
Yeah.
like you said, yeah, that's. But most of my clients are great. You know,
Yeah.
they're good people. A lot of times they get some pressure, and if they're even look, we're getting pressure with this. Can we move a deadline? And say, okay, I understand. It doesn't happen all the time. Let's see what we could do.
Yeah.
That's very different from you're incompetent. You didn't read it correctly. And
Right.
very very different. Very different. Adrian, I love what you're doing. Thank you so much for your time there. I was very excited when you accept this. I think what's happening with you helping so many people freelancing, I think it's strengthening what we do. We're able to get great services quickly, and I think it just benefits so many. And those who want to do it, make the look at what you have to offer, look what the results are, look what the risks are, and then make your decision. But I really enjoyed our time together. Thank you so much. Anybody listening, how can we get in touch with you?
All of my social media links and everything are available at designingandthriving.com.
Designingandthriving.com. Great domain. And great site. And you've got a lot of great stuff on Instagram. We went over a little bit, and Facebook, and you're on LinkedIn as well. Thanks so much for your time. If I'm ever in the Northeast area, perhaps all of us can get a cup of coffee at the original Starbucks up there.
Oh, yes. It was so great, Joey. Thank you so much.
You be well. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you for listening and/or viewing Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources, and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations.